This is the Discuss Metal podcast with Jeff Gretz of Zayo. Hosted by Dan Terry. Presented by discussmetal.com.
Hello.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool.
I'm on my phone if that's cool.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
My our wireless is I think like everybody else's is, I mean, especially here in New York, it's like so bad that I figure the phone has seemed to be working better.
Right. I'm sure everybody's overloading the network right now anyway.
Everyone's watching Tiger King.
Nice. How far have you gotten?
I finished it. I wasn't planning on it, but Dan and Scott were on me so bad to watch it that I had to catch up just so they could send me memes about it.
Right. I've gotten the I'm never going to financially recover from this about everything imaginable the past 2-3 weeks. Yeah, the wife and I finished it the other night.
Apparently we're getting a new episode this weekend. So
that's what she said. I'm pretty excited about it. Well, then it was kind of like, I started looking through my Facebook friend list and I'm like, who am I friends with on Facebook that I haven't talked to on the podcast yet? And then I was like, there's Jeff. And so like, you're going to be my only Zayo related interview probably for a while. It's just like, I've had Scott on both of my shows like so many times. And, it's one of those like, man, I love Scott to death. I'm trying to diversify a little bit.
Well, and right now I have all the dirt on all the fun stuff, so it all works out.
Exactly. Well, I know he did like a live Instagram thing I guess it was a few days ago, maybe it was a week ago, but I didn't listen to that. I was at work. For the first time in my life, I'm dubbed essential. So.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
What do you do?
I fix oxygen concentrators.
Ah, okay.
So I am actually like that one I can justify out. Like that's for real,
yeah.
Essential.
Yeah, Marty's in the same boat. He's essential right now, and I don't even understand what he does. It's some kind of engineering stuff, and it has something to do with power grids or nuclear stuff or something. So yeah, he's in the essential services right now.
Nice. So he has all of our lives in his hands, essentially.
Yeah, or at least our power, I guess.
There you go. Well, cool. So I don't know if you've ever listened to any of my podcasts before, but
yes,
we're not like, this is not like I'm going to read you a list of questions and answers and stuff like that. I just like to have a conversation. I'm not out to like be like interviewer of the year or anything like that. But one of the cool things is, especially to get your kind of perspective, my brother lives in Connecticut, and so obviously they're dealing with a lot of the stuff. And I thought to myself, well, Jeff's in the thick of it right now.
I don't remember where we stand right now. I'm in Brooklyn. We're either the highest concentrated or the second. It's between us and Queens right now. So yeah, I mean, we're like really, really in the thick of it.
So unlike my neighbors, you're actually terrified to leave the house.
For the most part, yeah. I'm the designated house leaver in my house. Like I am the guy that has to go to the grocery store. I'm the guy that has to take the garbage out. Yeah, and it's crazy because like I don't think a lot of people, even like some of my friends and family, kind of realize. I mean, in New York, you can't. It's almost impossible to hoard because you don't have the space to keep too much stuff. But also, even if you did, nobody has cars. So for me to go, if I wanted to go to the grocery store and pick up a 30-pack of toilet paper, that's pretty much all I'm bringing back because I have to walk it home. So everything you want to get is like, it's only like, what can I carry back in one trip reasonably?
Right.
As a result of that, our grocery stores are stocked. Like I haven't had an issue getting anything. I mean, occasionally I'll go to the grocery store and like there won't be any toilet paper or paper towels or eggs, but I go back 3 days later and all that stuff's there. And they might be out of something else, but I mean, we really haven't had to we're not in a panic mode about anything as far as supplies because we seem to be the supply lines seem to be okay here. Just because I think we don't have the people loading up a pickup truck with cases of Mountain Dew, which I've heard happening. And I don't understand why you need that much Mountain Dew or any, but there you go.
I think those are the people that think that society is about to collapse. And I mean, if you don't think that society is in a collapse state, prior to this, then,
Well, my wife and I have always kind of lived a little bit like we were prepping for something. So, I mean, we sort of order things in bulk as it is. So like there were certain things that we had like a relative stockpile of, like would order enough toilet paper that we have to order any for 2 months. We've always lived like that, so there was very little, adjustment on that kind of thing. We also started sort of stocking up on stuff before a lot of other people panicked.
Like you kind of read between the lines before everybody was out declaring it a panic or a pandemic.
Well, and again, too, like New York's weird because they can shut you down really fast. And like we've had over the past couple years, we've had, there were, a couple years ago, some of the hurricanes that hit here and they would shut down the subway lines. And you don't realize how isolated you can get when you don't have a car and there is no subway. And so we all, there's certain things that we just sort of keep around just in case, New York never loses its power. All our power lines are underground. Like the power never goes out, like from a storm or anything. But when it does, it's bad news.
Right.
So you always kind of like live in that sort of like, well, if something goes south here, you got to be ready to go.
If my power's out, then it's way worse for everybody else. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's in stark contrast to here in Missouri. I'm in St. Louis, and out here, I mean, I drive a pickup truck, which is kind of generic, but our stores have nothing. It's a weird mix of people that are overreacting, like overstocking, and people that don't seem to think that the virus is a thing. So right. we had like, our state is technically on lockdown, but like I was driving home during rush hour and you wouldn't think that it was lockdown rush hour. Like, I mean, it was just as bad as it always is.
Yeah. How long have you guys been on lockdown?
I would say the state, they waited a really long time. So, I want to say it's a week. It's only been like a week.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we're closing in on a month here now. And like, you knew it was bad when they finally shut the public schools down. Like when they said we're shutting the schools down, I mean, that was, it's like, okay. And that was, I think the day that we found out they were shutting the schools down was the day I was supposed to be traveling back to Pittsburgh because we were going to be playing that Code Orange release show. And we knew the show was canceled semi-officially for a little bit a couple days before it was. But there was still this weird, we're trying to see what can happen. And it was the morning I was supposed to leave, which would have been the day before the show. That Friday, I was like, there hit a certain point where I'm like, I got to know if I'm getting in the car and driving back to Pennsylvania.
Right.
Like
right.
Because I'm like, even if I'm heading back there and they shut it down, now I got to turn around and come back. Like, and I remember it was that day that we found out, oh yeah, the New York schools are closed till April 20th. And that was when I was just like, all right, this is out of hand. And I called the guys. I'm like, I know the show is technically canceled, but like, even if for some reason there's a miracle, I'm not coming back. Like we're shut down.
I'm going to send you guys some loops and you guys can do the Reformat Reboot album live. Yeah.
Well, Scott, actually, they have, we got for at least like the most recent material, I think everything from like Well-Intentioned Virus onwards, we have the isolated drum tracks. So that's how those guys will rehearse stuff while I'm not there.
Okay. That's a question.
Like we were going to debut a new song at the Code Orange show, and they were rehearsing it with my drum parts from the record. And then I was going to come in and we were all going to run it together. But they're actually able to have like they started off, I have a count in, and then my drums are playing through the PA in the rehearsal space. And
that's awesome.
Play along with it.
Gotta love modern technology. That's awesome. It's also kind of scary too, right? That they could just go out and play anytime they wanted without you.
Well, I mean, they could, I guess.
I mean, historically, they've never really done that. So, Yeah, and that was actually.
But I'm usually the guy that orchestrates all the logistics of us going to play. So I don't know if they would know what they were doing to set the shows.
Right. Well, that was something I wanted to get into. Is Code Orange famously streamed that show live. I mean, I know they were the only ones there.
Right.
Was there ever any consideration of that, like to stream the whole show, or was it like one of those it's a pandemic, we're getting out?
No, I mean, it was never offered to us.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and even then, I don't know that we would have done it because I was leery about coming back because we didn't know what was happening. And at that point, I was even saying to my wife, I'm like, if I get in the car and go for as fast as New York was moving, we didn't know what was going to happen. We're like, what happens if I get to Pennsylvania and they're like, okay, we're shutting down interstate travel?
You either have to turn around or you get trapped in the state. Yeah.
Yeah. And now they haven't really technically done that yet. But at that point, we didn't know. That was, the New York governor. I mean, he stepped in pretty fast and shut stuff down because the mayor wasn't in New York City. The governor stepped in and said, nope, we're shutting down the state. So, yeah, there was a little bit of nervousness on that.
Yeah. They shut Florida down.
Yeah.
Interstate travel. You get to the border and they're like, turn around, go home.
Yeah.
That is terrifying. But to get into a little bit of the, I guess, more musical side of things, people are probably like 10 minutes in and they're like, what? Why all this COVID-19 talk? But I mean, if people that are listening to this aren't used to me rambling, I mean, what are we even doing here? But, one of the things that I thought was interesting that you guys have been dropping, I don't know if it's hints or not. It's sometimes hard for me to remember, differentiate between what you guys have posted on socials, versus what Scott has just told me.
Right.
But my understanding is basically the new album is done, it's a thing.
Yeah, it's done, and it's in the process of being mixed. Our original intention was to have it mixed. It should have been done now, and then the plan was to have a mid to late summer release. Unfortunately, because of all this, we can't even be mixed right now because even the studio where it was being mixed has been locked down.
Right. Yeah.
So now we're in a sort of in a holding pattern, which, funny enough, we started to rethink a couple things about the record. So we're technically still working on it now. We started working on it again.
So you had a little bit of time to be like, I don't know if I like this, or if I, want to try this or something like that.
It was not even so much that. It's like we're sort of adding some stuff to it.
Okay.
Or we're adding a little bit more layers, a little bit more. What does Scott and I call it? Sort of sad ambience, mixed into the stuff. It's going to be a little bit more atmospheric and layered, which is something we talked about doing, and then it just never happened. And then when everything got held up, we're like, okay, let's work on this. So we're digging a little bit more into that. I think that Chris from Under Oath is actually, we gave him an instrumental song and said, do your thing, do your atmospheres and all the stuff that you do. And it's an instrumental. So he has full reign. It's just go. You basically be the, unofficial vocalist on it, even though it's not vocals. It's
right. But it's its own stamp. Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. So we're sort of just taking advantage of it to be these things that we talked about maybe doing that we hadn't, let's just dig into that now because it can't be mixed until, we're open back up again. Which I really think this record probably won't come out till 2021. I mean, in the best case scenario. I mean, it really can't. Even if we get it mixed, even if everything opens up this summer and it gets mixed, by the time that all the other stuff that has to happen happens, we might be able to get it out before the end of the year, but we don't want to put out another record in November or December.
Sure. No, I get that.
Because those records just get lost. So we're just all right, we'll just get it done when we get it done and then look at what our timeline is and we'll get it out as soon as we can.
Well, beginning of 2021, that'd be around my birthday. So, that works out. It works out really well. Yeah. that's one of those things where, you guys have, especially recently, it's funny because people always talk about, like, whenever I'm talking to people saying, like, oh yeah, Zayo, I love those guys. I go and see them every time I can go see them, and they're like, yeah, but they don't tour like regularly or whatever. And I kind of feel like the band is more, in a certain sense, more active now than you guys have ever been, in the sense of you guys are always dropping like little, I kind of call them doggy bags, of stuff. We got a remix album, from a fan perspective, totally out of the blue.
Right.
We got, so many splits. I've got a shelf dedicated just to Zayo splits that I've gotten, like literally in the past 2 years. They just kind of keep coming one after another. And I guess if I had to ask anything resembling a question, it would be, is that kind of more in the modern mindset of let's go ahead and release, I don't want to say singles versus albums, but just like release content in a way to keep people more interested because everything's like 1,000 miles an hour these days?
Well, not necessarily like that so much. I think a lot of it early on was just a backlog of material. Like when we, even though we weren't recording or playing, there was writing happening. And when we finally got back together and said, let's do this. I mean, when we started what ended up becoming the Sessions for a Well-Intentioned Virus, I mean, we recorded 20 songs because that's what was written, and so we're like, let's just record everything and then figure out what to do with it. And instead of just putting out like this massive, 80-minute or 90-minute double album, we just sort of divided it all out. And for us, because we can't, we could tour, we just don't want to in that sense. Like we don't want it to go back to where it was. We're like, well, for us to survive, we just have to play constantly. Because to us, the band did that for so long, it starts to really, it changes your perspective on everything. And we're in this situation now where it's like, well, so we can't tour. So how do we keep ourselves out there? And it's like, well, let's just put things out. Like we're not on a release schedule. And, we do some things that are like singles, and it's not necessarily that those singles will then show up on an album. It's like, well, no, the single's it. Like that's the song that's where it exists. And now this album is a whole other thing. Like, cause we still like the album format. The new record that we're working on is technically a double album. It'll be two pieces of vinyl. It'll still be a single CD, but it's about an hour long, maybe a little over an hour. So it's the longest Zayo record yet. It's still only about 10 songs. They're just really long songs. Long
atmospheric songs. Yeah.
A lot of them. Yeah. There's a lot of slow, quiet stuff. There's a lot of songs that take time to develop. There's one that like breaks the 10-minute mark, and it's not like a, what was that song on Liberate?
Man the Cage, Jack Wilson.
Yeah, it's not like that where it's like a big atmosphere piece. Like this is actually like a song with like movements, and
that's cool.
Because that's just where we went. That's where we were at. But yeah, and we're still writing. We're to the point now where we're like, okay, even though we're still working on this one, like now we're like, okay, I got some riffs. We're going to start exchanging things back and forth. Like we're just constantly moving, because that's what excites us now. We still like playing shows, but now it's like, okay, well, we figured out a way that we can record and release music, and people are into it, and we have a lot of different ideas, and we can put out an electronic remix album, and people don't freak out, because it's not that they don't think, people don't think like, oh, that's where they're headed now, because we know immediately we can slap them with this other thing right after that,
Yeah, and you don't feel left out when you miss something too.
Right. It's like, and we talked about that before. We're like, if we put out a bunch of different, if we keep the releases coming and we keep material coming, you can get away with a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because if you put out a record that's really experimental and then you vanish for 10 years, everybody just assumes that whatever your next record is going to be what that last one was.
Yeah, like Refused.
But if you're putting out a record like every year, you get away with a little bit more. Because, that's kind of what Zayo did in the first place. I mean, Self-Titled was nothing like Liberate.
No, not even close.
They came out, a year apart?
Yeah. It was like, those albums came out so close together. It's crazy to me how much history there was between all of them.
Yeah.
like in just such a short period of time. Because I mean, I was in high school, and I'm just seeing those records drop like one after another, and I mean that was a weird, disjointed time, for them. But yeah, it's crazy how much history. But it just seems like even compared to those days, whenever it was based on touring, and even I think maybe you guys toured the most during what was it, like the Funeral God?
Oh yeah,
Funeral God
Fear era. We were out constantly, and even then, we didn't tour as much as a lot of our peers and friends did. I mean, there were certain rules that we had about touring, like that our agents and managers knew. It was like no more than 5 weeks at a time, and then we have to have at least 2 or 3 weeks off. Like that was sort of the pattern that we established. Very rarely was that broken.
Yeah.
I think the closest we ever came to that was when I know we did. It was like we spent 2 weeks in Chicago doing the Fear record, and immediately left and went on I think it was like a 6-week tour with In Flames. And then we came home. We had like a week and a half off, and we went out on another tour. Wow. I think that was. That might have been that Ferret tour it was like Madball, Us, Remembering Never.
Yeah, I think I remember that one.
And then we didn't make it through that one. That was one of those moments where we're like, we didn't listen to our own rule. Like we let it slide. It didn't work. Okay, fine. And then we went back to the rules that we had set.
Well, and everybody has their own lives, and that's the big thing because I remember I listened to, I guess it was a while back, whenever you guys were on, or I think it was just specifically you on As the Story Grows with Travis, whenever you guys did, you just put out Pure Victory, and you were talking about that, how like after that era of the band, it was like you guys were so burned out that you weren't even like, nobody would do, like you guys, if you guys were talking, you weren't talking about the band or like what you guys were going to do.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I don't think I talked to any of those guys for like maybe 2 years. I mean, and it wasn't anything it wasn't really like personal. It
wasn't anything dramatic.
It's like, nobody was mad at each other. It was just like, we had nothing to say. We spent so much time around each other. And then when we finally like just severed it, it was just like, I don't have anything to say to those guys. I've said it all for the past however many years. I mean, on my end, I just got busy. I had moved to New York, and I was, and then I started touring, playing From Autumn to Ashes. So I was busy with them. I mean, I don't know how much those guys were talking back in PA. I mean, because they all lived relatively close. But yeah, so I mean, it's just
they might have been going out for drinks, but not like practicing.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, I talked to Scott probably the most. Him and I usually have 2 or 3 times a week, sort of like State of the Union meetings about like what the plans are.
Here's what we're doing. Yeah, sure.
Right.
And I think that's, have you found, and like that since you guys kind of adopted more of the strategy that you guys have now, which is more of you guys still play shows. I mean, I've seen you guys like 3 times in the past year or maybe year, 2 years, some of them I had to drive further than others. You guys finally came to St. Louis back in August. And I brought you guys beer because I was so thankful.
That's right.
And,
well, I thank you.
Yeah. Well, I try to please. That was, but I mean, what you guys have been doing is just basically like limited runs, and you'll take out some cool bands, the bands that you guys usually play with are really good on those. It's almost like handcrafted, like what complements a Zayo show really well. And cause I think I saw, let's see, it was St. Louis, obviously. And then I saw you before that in Indy. And then I saw you guys before that in Nashville. Yeah.
St. Louis, would that have been Atlas Moth?
That was okay. St. Louis was oh my god, why am I blanking on this band? Because I have their album, Hollow Earth.
Oh yeah.
I bought their LP at the show.
And, was it Wolf King?
Wolf King, yep.
Yeah, we actually just pulled the plug on a West Coast run with Wolf King. It was supposed to be in July, and it was this big discussion. We're like, do we book this? Do we announce this? Like the dates were held, it was booked. And it was like, do we do this run?
Can you do this run?
Well, yeah, can we? And then if we book it, and then we can't, they're not allowing shows to happen in July. Do we just cancel it and refund people that bought tickets? Do we try to postpone it? Our problem is the way that we book shows. We book things so far in advance that if we were to postpone it, chances are it was going to be at least a year before we could get back there. So we were just like, you know what? Let's just scrap it. And we were really excited too, because I thought the lineup was probably one of the best lineups of bands that we've had for a run. Who cares? It was going to be us.
Just throw it out there. Yeah.
Yeah. It was going to be us, Wolf King, Ether Coven, and Vatican.
Okay.
And we were just really excited about those.
That's awesome.
And yeah. And it just got to the point where we're like, we had to yank it. And we went back and forth a lot about like, and we're just like, yeah. And I said to the guys, I'm like, we have a really good run. You know, Zayo has a reputation for canceling shows or not showing up. And we haven't done that since we started doing this again.
Right.
I'm like, even if, no, it's not our fault. I'm like, let's just wait. Let's try and do it again when we know it's clear.
Well, yeah. I mean, July, we're not even sure if we're going to be out of this in June, you know?
That's what I mean.
At this point,
and like, and you know, and we have to book plane tickets, and like, granted, they're really cheap right now, but
of course they are. Yeah,
you know. But we're watching the sports. If Major League Baseball says we don't think we're playing in August, then I guarantee you shows are not happening in July.
Your metal band's not going to go on tour. Yeah,
right.
The same, yeah.
Follow the money. If the money's not doing it, you're not doing it.
Right.
You know that's kind of where. And I just saw they were just talking about like whether Major League Baseball would open up, and you know there was a big meeting between the governors and the baseball owners and the White House or whatever, and they were saying, oh, we think baseball could be back in August, and the governor of California is like, I don't see that.
Right.
And it's like, you know, all of our most of the shows we're booking are in California in July, and it's like, yeah, if he's not going to let baseball happen in August, they're not letting our metal show happen in July.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
It's just not happening.
I mean, you could have it. You might get away with it legally. No one's going to come. You know?
Well, that's the other thing too. It's just like I'd rather just wait. You know?
I'd be there, masks and gloves, but you know,
we're assuming Furnace Fest is happening.
Yeah,
right
yeah. I was just going to get into that. Yeah,
We just confirmed. I just gave the confirmation for we're playing some shows on the way down. We're gonna roll with that. That's September. Because we figure if Furnace Fest gets canceled, we're probably going to try to keep the same shows on the way down, and we'll just shift them to whenever Furnace Fest is. So we are going to play some shows on the way down to Furnace.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't get canceled. I mean, I've already got hotel booked and all that. And
oh yeah,
because I mean, it's like for a podcast like mine, I mean, it's a wet dream, of a show. And that was one thing I was going to ask you is kind of your feelings on having to roll double duty on that, as Zayo and From Autumn to Ashes, both being on the bill.
I mean, at first I was kind of dreading it, although it was technically my idea. Once Zayo was on, and From Autumn to Ashes, we were already getting together and we were writing and talking about. I mean, we just got together and said, let's write some couple songs and see how it feels, and then maybe go out and play some shows.
Right.
And that was right around the time the Furnace Fest thing came. And I asked the guys, I'm like, hey, have you guys heard from Furnace Fest? They're like approaching bands from that era to reunite. And they were all like, no one heard anything. I sort of loosely dropped a hint to the Furnace Fest guys that we were available.
Right.
And when they asked us, I told the Brian and From Autumn to Ashes that was handling some of the contacts with the booking agents and stuff. I said, if Furnace Fest asks, we can do it, but it has to be the same day as Zayo.
Of course, yeah.
That's one of our stipulations. I said, because we're touring down, and I don't want to leave the Zayo guys sitting there because From Autumn to Ashes is playing Friday, Zayo's playing Sunday. I'm like, if you can get them to agree to have both bands on the same day, I'll do double duty.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, that's got to be. I mean, I was just thinking about the heat. Furnace Fest is not a clever name,
right.
Like at all. And I wondered just because I mean that's two very very high energy sets. Maybe not necessarily in a row, but
they're high energy in a different way. Like they are very physically different for me to play. Although From Autumn to Ashes it's not as taxing on me drumming wise, because I do have to handle some like vocal duties.
Right.
That wears me out almost more than some of the playing does. But But even then, it's a festival atmosphere, and at best, bands are playing a 45-minute set. So can I handle 2:45 or even an hour set, like with a break in between? Absolutely. Like that's not going to be a big deal. I mean, Zayo typically we've been playing like an hour 20.
I'd say your guys' sets have been really, really, I mean, incredible as far as a fan perspective. Like somehow getting all the hits and peppering in like newer material.
Right.
So yeah, that's like I was really surprised in St. Louis when you guys played that. Like, not only did you guys have that many songs, but it's actually the very first time I've gotten tired during a Zayo set. Like not bored, but just like super tired. I had a whole group of friends that like let me go front and center or whatever, and somebody even asked me. I don't remember if it was Scott or Russ was like, they're like, if you want to stand like over here or whatever, watch the show, you can or whatever. And I was just like, no, I want to be like front and center, And, but one of the things that I thought was really cool about your live set, not to jump off to jump off the Furnace Fest thing, but like, I mentioned this to Scott on my other podcast, when I interviewed him, was that like your guys' live set is so much more theatrical, than it has been. Cause I mean, I've been going to see Zayo pretty much anytime I can for the past 10, 15, 20 years, Yeah. And one of the things that I thought was really cool is that you've got like samples from the records playing in between, and like whenever I saw you guys in Indy, there was like a really cool like smoke show, smoke and light show and stuff. And it was really cool to see that because I'm used to, for lack of a better term, I'm used to seeing Zayo in a shitty club,
Right.
And
which we still play shitty clubs.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're not opposed to that. And we actually kind of enjoy it sometimes. But no, I mean, and even then, I think like even like the thing with Indy where you said like the smoke and light show and stuff like that's usually venue specific. But like we control what we can control, which is the flow of the set, and like you said, like the technology of stuff has changed so much from what we were doing before. Like having those samples from the records, or even building new transition pieces for the live sets, is something that's really easy for us to do now. And I think we've gotten better at building sets. I would agree. Yeah. Everyone in the band there's always those songs that people really want to play in the band that maybe one or two other people do not want to play. And then there's those other songs that maybe someone in the band really hates, but everyone else really wants to do it. And we've gotten really good at building a set in terms of, our priority in any given run is what new material do we want to play? And it's usually when we're building a set list, it's like, okay, on this tour, what do we want to open with? And then what other new songs do we want to play? Everything after that gets slotted in based on the arc of the set. And we found certain songs that we had retired coming back because they fit into that vibe, or they fill a mood in the set. We had retired the song Told to Scream for a little bit.
Yeah.
It came back because we discovered that we had fun playing it, but it came back because it served a functional purpose, because there's a bunch of guitar tuning changes that happen in the set, and they can tune their guitars while I'm playing the drum intro.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
That was distinctly why it came back at one point. And then we discovered that we liked playing it, so it's slotted in there. Yeah, there's a lot of weird reasons songs come back in or get taken out. It happens with new songs too. There's songs that we're really attached to that we don't play because either they don't work within the context of a set, or we're just like, this song is a great opener. Like we were opening up with Weeping Vessel when we first put out Well-Intentioned Virus. That was our opening song. That song doesn't work anywhere else in the set. It just doesn't.
No.
As much as we like it.
It has to be the beginning.
Has to be the beginning. So that song now, boop, that's gone now. Even though we like it, just it kills the momentum. And that's, like I said, that's one of the things that we really got conscious of that we weren't before. Like, what is the momentum of the set? What's working? What's not?
Well, and even that song, Tool to Scream, I think it was the last two times, might have been three. I remember seeing Zayo in high school, and I think this was actually before you were in the band, so it kind of dates me a little bit. But they didn't even play the intro to Tool to Scream, and like,
oh yeah,
and
I mean, we never played it. Even when we were doing it, like in the Fear era, we didn't play it.
Yeah, it was just you just went right in,
Yeah,
and it was really nice getting that. Like the indie trip, that one was rough because I brought my co-host Joe with me to Nashville, and that was awesome. But whenever I went to Indy, I went solo. I worked like 4 hours that day, and then I told the guy I was working with, I was like, all right, I gotta go. And so I drove 5 hours up to see you guys in Indy. And I remember when you guys played that song, I was blown away that you guys played the full intro to it because like I needed a breather because like I mean at that point it had been not, like ignoring the fact that I had already watched like 4 bands that were awesome play prior. But like, having that intro, that sort of like chill intro and stuff. And then with you playing kind of the sound samples, it definitely created an atmosphere that I had never seen before on stage. And it kind of blew my mind a little bit because a lot of bands, like, and this is going to sound really mean, and I don't mean it to sound mean, a lot of the bands that are as old as Zayo, whenever I go and see them, the experience later in life is not better than the experience earlier in life.
Yeah. I've seen that happen. I mean, there are bands that I've seen like that blew my mind, and I go back and see them years later. I'm just like, wow, they really shouldn't have done that.
Right.
And I've seen it go the other way too. I've seen bands where I saw them and they're just like, bands. I mean, still to this day, the Melvins blow my mind every time I see them.
Right.
I mean, and I think they get better live every year they play. Like that's just, some bands could figure it out, and you can age gracefully. Let's put it that way. It's possible.
Totally.
But yeah, it really bums me out when I see a band but I can't even tell if it's like, I don't even know if it's an age thing. I just think it's like, what's your motivation?
Right. It's how much thought you put into what you're doing.
Right. And like why you're doing it. Like, I remember I saw as much that they were one of my favorite bands, and I saw a couple years ago, one of the Jesus Lizard reunion shows.
Okay.
And I was really bummed out because I didn't feel it. I mean, I didn't feel the fire. It was just like, why are you guys doing this? Which I mean, and Dwayne Dennison is a guitar player. I mean, I'm not even a guitar player really, but like that guy's like, he's like a god. I'm like, I mean, and I got my money's worth out of watching him play. I always will. But it was just like I didn't feel it. It's just like, oh man, that was a bum out.
One of my other co-hosts, Jeff, whose name's also Jeff. Yeah, but he spells it with a G because he's weird. He's like the biggest Jesus Lizard apologist on the face of the earth. So he could have gone and seen that same show as you and been like, I don't know what you're talking about. This was like the most amazing experience of my life.
Yeah, I mean, well, it depends on what. And then, like the thing, they weren't bad. They weren't bad.
Sure.
But like there was something not there. Like I felt like they were going through the motion. I mean, I guess it just felt like it was going through the motion.
They existed. Yeah.
In the wrong ways. And it's just like, they sounded great. I mean, the sonically it was there. It was, and I think for us, and I can't tell. I don't know how it's coming across what we're doing. All I know is that every time we go to play a show right now, and every time we're getting ready to step on stage, and every time we talk about going to play shows, everybody is super excited.
Yeah.
Like I've never played a show with Zayo since we started playing again in like 2014, 15, where I felt like, oh man, I can't wait to just get off stage and like go back to the hotel. Never thought that ever.
No. And you guys don't act like that either.
Anybody complain at any point. Like, I don't want to go play the show tonight. I don't feel good. I'm tired. Like, blah, blah. And I know we've played shows since we've been out where somebody didn't feel good. Like somebody was like, oh, I got a cold or I got this like stomach thing going on. But even then, like, it's like, well, I'm just excited to play the show, which is something that you never have happen when you're on the road for, months at a time. There's a couple, you can have a 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 day stretch where there's somebody in the band that no one goes near because they're just in a foul mood because they don't feel good or they're just being miserable and you just give them their space and leave it. We don't have any of that right now.
Yeah, you think the limited...
And we haven't felt that. Like, we get excited every time we step on stage. And like I said, we're not doing it for the money. I mean, we're doing fine. But like, no one's throwing boatloads of cash at us to do anything. You know what I mean? So like, that's not our motivation. We're doing this because we want to do it. Every time we make one of those trips, those 5 or 6 show trips, it's like pulling teeth to get it scheduled because of what everybody has going on. That when we get there, like, we're all in, that's
Like, and that's cool. And that's kind of the benefit of having that more limited run, because like when you guys announce and you guys don't announce tours obviously, but it's like, we're going to play 8 shows. You know what I mean? Like, and they're going to be here, and these are the bands that are going to be there. We'd really love it if you guys came out. You know, that doesn't put pressure on you where you're just touring because maybe the record didn't sell that well in week 1. And they want you to tour more in order to get new fans into the band. And I always thought that was so weird, because I spent so much of my adolescent life listening to bands like Zayo that, you know, when I saw you guys grinding so hard during the Fear era, I remember thinking, like, does Zayo like need to be hitting the road seeking new fans?
Well, that was a lot of our argument during that era with the people that we were, you know, the label or whatever. You know, everyone was like, well, you got to go out, you got to push for the next album. And we're just like, are we really? We're like, at this point, like, most of the people that would be into Zayo, that could potentially like what we do,
are already into it, yeah,
or already know that they don't like it. Like, you know, how many people are you really like opening up to, you know, that? And we felt like, you know, we're getting burned out to maybe pick up a couple 100 more first week sales on the next album cycle.
Right.
This is not, you know,
this is not rock and roll.
We weren't allowed to headline for a while. That's why, like, between the Funeral of God and the Fear is What Keeps Us Here, and even after the Fear came out, Zayo didn't do a headlining run.
Right.
It was all support slots.
That's true. Yeah, so I didn't think about that. Yeah, but you guys were out all the time.
Out all the time, but always playing to a technically unconverted / hostile audience.
Right.
And that really can start to, you know, get it used, you know, mentally, where you're like, does anyone care about the band anymore? You know, you're like, oh yeah, we're out there, we're playing these songs, no one's reacting to stuff. But in hindsight's 2020, you're like, oh well, most of the people at those shows probably never heard us before,
or they think that you're like a religious band.
Yeah, that there could be part of that too, or just like people don't know the songs, so they're just like, I'm just taking this in. But you know, after a while, it starts to like mess with you. You know, and it wasn't until we started going out and actually playing our own show. Like, this is a Zayo show. If you're coming here, you're going to get, you're going to get your Zayo. This is our night. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, if we were getting these kind of responses from people back then, maybe we wouldn't have stopped. And, and it wasn't that, and like I said, it wasn't that the fans weren't there. It was just, we spent so much time playing to other people's fans, with our fans scattered throughout, you know, the crowds, you know. But yeah, it was really, I mean, we really had you know, third party imposed blinders on us when we were doing some of those support slots, you know, because they're like, well, you have to do this. And we're just like, no one cares, because we're looking out in the crowds. And it was till later, I'm like, oh, they're one of our crowds. Our crowd was sitting at home saying like, yeah, I'd love to go see Zayo, but I'm not going to spend $40 to go see them play for 20 minutes before In
Pig
Flames.
Destroyer, yeah, like,
yeah. Oh, I mean, a Zayo Pig Destroyer, I'd love that.
Didn't you get? I feel like I thought you guys did play with Pig Destroyer back. And most of my memory's killing me. I feel like
possible.
I feel like there was a Zayo Pig Destroyer show, because I didn't go to it because I suck.
I mean, we're fans of Pig Destroyer, and
me too. 100%.
I haven't checked it out, but apparently, and this came to us from somebody else. So this is third party information.
Okay.
I don't want to be, you know, held responsible for if this is wrong.
Insert grain of salt here. Okay.
I heard that there is a riff on the latest Pig Destroyer record that sounds like a Zayo riff. I don't know what it was, but somebody said to, was it Scott from Pig Destroyer, Scott Hall, asked him, did you rip that off from Zayo? And he said, yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. I will dig into that later on.
And like, he basically said like, yeah, man, I love Zayo. Yeah, that's exactly what you're hearing there. Like, I don't think it was like a straight ripoff, but it sounded like and we were absolutely, when we found that out, like, I remember like Scott and Russ were just like, that is fucking amazing.
I don't know how I'll have to listen to that record and see if I can pinpoint it, if it is a real thing, because I've listened to that Pig Destroyer album a lot. I actually really enjoyed it.
If they really did rip off a Zayo riff, everyone in Zayo was absolutely thrilled, because we love Pig Destroyer.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love Pig Destroyer. I wouldn't say as much as Zayo, but like, I have this weird history of being like a kid in like Christian youth group as a teen, and so like Zayo's always got kind of that like, yeah, you know, it was always one of those weird things. I know this podcast is not about me, but you know, Zayo always like even like from a worldview kind of evolved like with me, you know, as I got older. So
people change.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But I think what was most interesting about that era was that you guys were grinding so hard, but then like, you know, you look at where you guys are at now, like whenever you guys announced, you know, Well Intentioned, and how it just like sold out like immediately. Like it's such a confirmation of what you were saying to whomever, you know, was in charge or whatever, at the time, that like we already have our fan base.
Right.
You know, we don't have to fight to get new fans. The fans that we have could probably support what we're doing already, and it'd be fine. And we just do it for them, you know?
Well, what's insane is if you actually like, and this is getting into like weird business, like music biz nitty gritty. If you look at the first week sales of The Fear Is What Keeps Us Here, which would have been the record that came out after all of the massive support touring, constant grinding, all the money being spent, the first week sales of The Fear Is What Keeps Us Here were exactly the same as the first week sales of The Well-Intentioned Virus.
That's interesting.
That is what, 10 years later, in an era when they're telling you that people don't buy records anymore. So not only
everybody
did we match
literally
the first
bought
week
the
sales,
record,
but we did it 10 weeks later, or 10 years later. Which means that technically, maybe if it would have been even higher back then.
Yeah, entirely possible. Everybody bought the actual record, like you guys pressed it to vinyl. That's my favorite thing about Zayo now, is that everything that you guys put out, I can get on vinyl.
Yeah, and we're trying to get the old stuff out there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I made a post a while back because, like, for whatever reason, man, every single time somebody gets their hands on a Splinter Shards vinyl or a Liberate vinyl, and I'm going to call them out here on this podcast right now. But okay, so Steven Sarro, ex-Tantrum of the Muse, all that stuff, whatever. He's Travis Turner's cousin.
Okay.
I think he sold a vinyl copy of the self-titled Liberate, and they weren't like the ones that you guys did a few years ago. They were the like tooth and nail vinyl releases, or whoever they sold that out to or whatever. He was selling those online, and I tried so hard to get him to sell those to me, and he wouldn't do it because like these kids online were paying like hundreds of dollars for them.
Oh yeah,
I was just like, dude, I love Zayo, I do, but I can't do that. You know,
there weren't a lot of those. Like, there's not a lot of any of that stuff out there. Like, even by our standards, even by what we do now. Like, those were not. I think there were only like 500 self-titles pressed.
Very little, yeah.
In Liberate, maybe 1,000.
Yeah.
We press more than 1,000 of a full-length record of stuff we do now, and they sell out. So yeah, those were really rare.
Well, yeah, and like that's what I'm getting at is that you guys are selling them out in a time where people are telling you that you know, or even like 10 years ago, people were telling you like, well, people don't buy physical media, and it kind of turns out that, you know, maybe it's just Zayo, maybe it's just like you guys have a unique fan base in the sense where we'll just buy it, you know, regardless of of how it's presented.
Maybe. I don't know, because I see other bands selling out stuff. There's stuff that I can't get a hold of. We just feel bad about a lot of the stuff because even the stuff that came out as a band, as an entity, even if it's stuff that like I wasn't on or, you know, Scott wasn't on, it's still like that's still our name.
Sure, now. Yeah.
You know, we're carrying the torch on, like this is what we've been working at. We just want it to be out in as an affordable way as possible and as good as possible. So even those Funeral God vinyl reissues, we bent over backwards to make those as good as they could be, because it was the band's name and we wanted it to be, you know, good. A pain in the ass to do those. I don't know if we'll see any of the Ferret stuff come out again because of that.
That was rough. Yeah. I had,
and it was it was not Tragic Hero's fault at all. I know that they took a lot of flack for that.
It was Warner Brothers, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I missed the boat whenever you guys did the reissues of the Tooth and Nail stuff earlier on.
To be specific, we didn't do those. Like, and that's, I mean, and nothing against Brent and Broken Circles, that we were not involved in those. Because if we would have been involved in them, they would have been different. And it's nothing against him. Like, he did what he could with what he had to work with. Those were sort of done not in a malicious way, but behind our backs. Like, we just didn't know about them.
They were just suddenly a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, when the Blood and Fire reissue, I remember when the Blood and Fire vinyl came out. It came out like the week before the Awake record came out, and we had no idea. We found out about it on like Lamb Goat or something. And we're just like, what? Like, we had no idea.
That's one of those, like, when did somebody think they were going to tell us? Yeah.
But I mean, like, Brent did what he did what a lot of these labels do. They're like, well, I have a label, I want to reissue something. And they approach the label that owns it. And they're like, can I license this? And he was a fan. Right. He wanted to do it. But, you know, they anytime a label owns the rights for something and you want to license it from them, they're going to, you know, they want to make their money off of it.
They're not making active money on the record anyway, for the most part.
Right.
Yeah. So they're going to try to, like, get whatever kind of return on their investment that they can get.
Right. And honestly, he was doing that at a time that was really beneficial, because the Tooth and Nail Solid State still owned those at the time. So he was licensing it from them, and they were giving him actually a really good deal. And that's why it stopped before he got to Parade of Chaos, because Tooth and Nail Solid State got sold to Capitol. And even though he had announced Parade of Chaos, he had everything rolling with it. The contract was done, everything. And then all of a sudden, Capitol stepped in and said, nope, we're buying this catalog. We're freezing this. You can't put it out.
Because we want to put it on Spotify. And yeah, okay.
I mean, it was going to be there. It was there anyway, but they want all these Capitol, Warner Brothers, Universal, Sony. They basically guard those vinyl rights now, because there's always going to be some label that will be willing to pay the ridiculous licensing fees to do the work for them, for no effort on their part.
They just collect the checks and sit back. Yeah.
Right. The difference between what's happening with technically Universal and Capitol own all the Tooth and Nail Solid State stuff. The difference between them and how Warner Brothers operates, which owns the Ferret stuff, it's just as expensive to put them out. Capitol and Universal are much more flexible with how they make you do it. So the odds of the Universal, the Tooth and Nail stuff coming out of vinyl now are much better, because they seem to be easier to work with.
But those seem to be the albums that people want you guys to reissue more than anything. Don't get me wrong. I'm definitely of the camp of I always wanted a Fear LP.
Yeah.
Always wanted that. But I mean, after the Funeral God debacle, I don't know how realistic that is, you know?
I mean, it's hard to say. And honestly, it's up to Warner. I mean, like the fact that it got tied up was because they just kept changing the rules as we were moving. Like, they got their money, but they kept moving the finish line at the last second, to the point that we couldn't, you know, when the pre-orders went up, everyone thought they literally told us we had a green light. And then it was like fine print that like messed everything up.
I'm not going to lie, man. I was pretty surprised when I had it on my doorstep eventually, you know, because that was, you know, like I told Scott, I was like, that's money that I spent a year ago. You know what I mean? Year and a half ago. So like, I'm not even thinking about that money, you know?
What was fucked up about it was it had to happen. Like, Tragic Hero was legally obligated to make them happen.
Right, because they'd been pre-ordered product.
Exactly. And that's where it got scary for everybody involved. And that's why I'm like, I'm glad somebody else was working on this, because we couldn't take that risk. I mean, what they were asking, what these labels ask, when I say labels, the labels that now own them, like the big corporate labels, Sony, whoever owns, what they're asking to put out, say, 2,000 copies of vinyl, a lot of times is more than the record cost to record in the first place. It's ridiculous. We could probably put Awake out on vinyl right now, because technically there is no contract. it came out on Ferret. Warner Brothers thinks they own it, but they can't. When we said to them before, we're like, "Can you show us the contract that you have for that record?"
Right, because they've
never got back to us.
My understanding is that you never did a contract for that. It was just Ferret put their logo on it, basically. But
I mean, they put it out. I mean, they paid for the manufacturing of that initial CD run. But at this point, it's their word against ours as to what that contract was.
And Ferret doesn't even exist anymore, do they?
No.
I mean, I think they went off and did Good Fight, but that was just the guys behind Ferret. It wasn't Ferret as an entity.
Right. Ferret in and of itself does not exist anymore. Anything if you see Ferret, it's a Warner Brothers subsidiary.
An imprint, yeah, okay.
It's not even an imprint because it's not even active.
Right.
I don't even think there's anybody active there.
Nobody's putting anything out under the Ferret banner. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why it pays to put out, in retrospect, put out your own stuff.
So with Zayo, everything's been under, since Well Intentioned has been under Observer, which is just you guys. Us. Yeah. Yeah.
It's literally us. Like, we can do anything we want with it. Like, it's our material. And I know other bands that could do that I don't. And when they're talking, they're like, "Oh, we're looking for a label right now." I'm like, "Why?
Yeah,
why?
just put it up for pre-order. People will buy it."
Yeah,
especially for bands that have an established fan base like Zayo. And I guess that's my next question. It's kind of a cheese question, but is that how did that feel? For you. When you're like, okay, we spent X amount of years trying to please the man, more or less, in a way, we spent all this time, all this effort, moments of our lives that we're never going to get back, times that we spent out on the road when we should have been maybe at home supporting our relationships or our jobs or whatever, right. And then you say, hey, we're going to put this record out. It's called The Well-Intentioned Virus. It's a new Zayo record. You guys are going to love it. It's nothing weird. We're not singing choruses. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be the Zayo that you guys want. And then you announce that, and then it's sold out. What is that feeling for you going into it? Like that confirmation of, we definitely made the right choice by putting this out ourselves.
It was weird because it kind of snuck up on us because that wasn't the initial intention. To a certain extent, we recorded everything. We were going to try to find somebody to work with us to put it out.
Right.
But we also knew we're going to record the whole thing. We're going to have everything taken care of. The album's going to be done. All the artwork's going to be ready to go. We literally need a label to say, yes, we'll press this and put it out and promote it. And, we would work out, because of that, a better deal than what you would have if the label paid the bills and you have a royalty. We were looking for a partnership with a label, and we had a couple of leads on that. In the back of our mind, I kept saying to Scott, when we would have these meetings, I would say, well, if we don't find one, I think we can do it ourselves. So that was always in the background, and everybody in the band was leery about it. It's a lot to do. It's a lot of risk. What if no one buys it? Now we're out. And when it came down to the fact that we realized that it just didn't make sense to partner up with some of the offers we had. It was weird. We had really low goals. I remember saying to Scott, I'm like, if, we're pressing this much, this is how much everything costs. This is our debt right now. If we sell 800 physical copies in any format, we'll at least have our investment back.
Right. You won't have lost anything. Yeah.
Right. And then I think we pre-sold 1,500.
Well, of course. It's not, and that's not just me saying it as a Zayo fan, but it makes business sense. And I think the hardest thing, and I struggle with this doing podcast stuff because I don't have a established fan base. You know what I mean? I don't have any of that. So for me, it's if I print, let's say 1,000 t-shirts, I might sell 200 of them. Or something like that. So it just kind of blows my mind here. And you say that, where you're like, well, what if nobody buys it? from a fan perspective, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I have pictures of my kid holding the vinyl, like whenever I got it in the mail, you know, like,
I mean, it's one of those things though. It wasn't necessarily what if no one buys it. It was like they said, that was that question of how many should we make versus how many do we automatically know we can sell to be safe. And like, that was always the dilemma. And it's like, and I think that is with a lot of bands. It's like, well, if we do it ourselves, you know, we're not going to be able to sell 20,000 records. How are we going to handle that? And I'm just like, well, then don't sell 20,000 records. Sell what you can handle. And who cares what the number is? Because you're going to make a lot more money selling 1,000 records on your own than you are selling 50,000 through, you know, a bad label deal.
Right, and there's no red
from
tape.
Experience on that.
Yeah, and there's no red tape or fine print that says, well, you sold this many records, but we are, you know, for whatever reason, like we're withholding however much because to pay for insert random fee that you didn't know about when you started, you know, like.
I mean, here's the thing, like, and I could say this, like, Zayo would not be what Zayo was without the work that happened from Tooth and Nail and the work that happened with Ferret. There was a lot of work and there was a lot of stuff that was done, like advertising or promotional stuff that happened. I'm not going to question that. What I'm saying is that when you have records on some of these labels that sold, you know, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 copies, and you've never seen a penny. And then you're looking at putting out a record and you're like, oh, geez, like if we sell 800 copies, everything's paid for. That kind of blows your mind. It really puts into perspective, like, wait a minute, how, I don't care what you did on advertising. How does 60,000 copies not break you even?
Right.
To the point where you're saying, oh, well, you're still 20,000 in debt. Like, no. There's no number that there's no way you can work the numbers that shows me that.
Right, you just get the money that you saved up or whatever, and you have all that money in your hand again after the pre-orders come in, and then you can immediately start. Like, this is how you end up in a situation where you're like, yeah, the next record's done. You know, we can continue to put out content. You know, that's kind of the way Scott had explained it to me, was that like. He's like, you know, we got this money together to do Well Intentioned. He's like, we did it. We got that money back. And then we put out Pyrrhic. And then we got that money back. And then we went, and Pyrrhic, and it's also so low cost in the sense that like, even something like Pyrrhic, which to my understanding is just songs that didn't make it onto Well Intentioned Virus, but it was one of those like, well, it's another Zayo record that you can have on, on vinyl, and you know, and like it works, and then you can put your splits out. You can you probably make more. Like, let's be real. Like, you probably make more than expected, probably more so than what your initial investment was.
Yeah, I mean, every release we do, like, not only pays for itself, but funds the next thing. And we're always thinking like 3 things ahead, you know, 2 or 3 things ahead. We're like, when we put out, I mean, I was recording the drums for the material that it will be coming out soon. The day Pyrrhic Victory was released, like literally on release day, I was in the studio. Like, we were that far ahead. Like, we knew that, like, what was going on. And even something like the remix record, was paid for from money we brought in from Pyrrhic Victory, from money that came in from the decoding transmissions from the Mobius strip 7-inch that we did.
Right.
You know, all these things were funding each other. And a bunch of the money that came in from the remix record is going into what we're doing for this double record. You know, everything is... The only thing that didn't fund something else was Funeral of God. Zayo technically lost money on that.
Yeah.
Like, we lost money on that.
That was a bad deal. I mean,
we wanted it to happen. I'm glad it happened, and I'm glad it happened the way it did. I wanted to see if we could do it, because I had heard horror stories from other people in the industry that represented much bigger artists than Zayo were, that said that, oh, we tried to work with Warner to reissue vinyl, and it's not worth it.
Right.
Like, we can't do it. And I'm just like, when we had the opportunity in front of us and the way it was pitched to me, I'm like, oh shit, if we pull this off, it's like a coup.
Right.
So we rolled with it. I mean, Zayo paid for all the packaging.
That's what I was going to ask. You paid for the
that.
packaging, and you pay to have it remixed for vinyl? Because I mean, it definitely sounds like that. I mean, I can put the CD in and the
We paid for the new mastering, and we paid for the packaging because I mean the price is really high to put this out. I mean, what Warner Brothers wanted per copy and what their minimum copies you had to order, it was ridiculous. And I said, like, we'll pay for the mastering, so we want it, and we'll pay for the packaging because we wanted a gatefold. We wanted the printed inner sleeves, so we paid for all that. But yeah, we lost a little bit on it. We didn't lose a ton. I mean, when I say we lost some money, we lost probably a couple $100. We didn't make anything on it. It was a passion project. It was something we wanted to see happen.
Well, and wasn't part of it fueled by you guys eventually wanting to be able to, it's one of those, if we play ball with them, right, and we cover the upfront costs, is it possible that maybe they might do a fear reissue? Which I think, my understanding is that that was what you guys wanted the whole time was, to get the fear on vinyl. Yeah.
We wanted everything out. We want everything out there. We were thrilled when Matt Traxler from Steadfast did the All Else Failed reissued.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're like, I want that. We want that more readily available and not having to be collector's fees. And again, he did it right, and he communicated with us. He had it remastered. He got in touch with the band, those guys, and he did it right.
It's killer.
And, he talks to us all the time, and he actually has a Zayo release coming out that we're coordinating. He's coordinating with us. From back in that era.
Really? Is it something that was unreleased, or?
It's a combination of a couple of the songs that were from the early splits with Sean.
Okay, because I've got the Zayo Steadfast, but I don't think I have anything else.
Yeah,
from that era.
There's a couple songs that were on split 7 inches that Steadfast had put out that he's going to release. There's 1 or 2 songs that were never released on anything with Sean. Okay. And then there's 5 or 6 songs with Eric Reeder singing that have never been released in any format.
Okay. That's going back to the first demos almost.
Yeah. Yeah, but these are not even the demos. These are versions of songs that have never been heard.
Okay.
These songs are these are new Zayo songs with Eric Reeder singing.
Wow.
Essentially.
Okay.
So he's putting out this release. It's going to be split in half. One half the Eric Reeder stuff, one half the Sean stuff. And again, he's been in contact with, Jesse and Roy and Mick and Sean and even Eric, in contact with us. He didn't want to step on our release schedule.
There's just so much stuff going on at once. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, that's the point we've gotten to. Pretty much all the eras of Zayo everybody talks. There's no hard feelings. When we played on the last couple tours, I know the last tour we did last fall, Eric came out to a show in Ohio. Roy has come out several times for shows. Sean Jonas came to our show in Kansas City.
Yeah, he's moved
and
there
hung out with us and stuff. I mean, we've seen Jesse. I mean, Jesse's band opened for us a couple years ago.
That was the Jesse Smith and the Holy Ghost?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We all talked to Jesse quite a bit. So everybody's and that's what we're kind of all working on. We've been in touch with Brett. I mean,
that's
it's kind of,
awesome.
I think a lot of people, I know a lot of people are just Zayo ruined what the original guys did, or the original guys order our records. I keep telling Roy and Sean and Mick, I'm quit ordering records for me. I'll send them to you.
Send me a message. I will send you the records. Yeah, you guys are part of this family.
The pre-orders, and I see I'm sending a record to Roy Gowdy. I'm why am I sending you a record? Just
right. You're there's plenty. That's
you get free stuff. Hilarious. Don't worry about it. You start the band.
You're in the club. Yeah, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for what you guys did originally. Yeah, sure. That's the thing that has changed changed as far as the perception of the band, too, over the years. Is, you know, like there was the Funeral of God. I call it the Funeral of God DVD because, like, the more I look at it, the more I feel like that DVD should have just been included as a bonus disc on Funeral of God, which, you know, went through all like the problems that everybody had and all the struggles and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of people take that as gospel, you know, like, oh, these guys all hate each other and it's this and this and this and this. But like, from what I've seen, and like, if you're paying attention, if you're reading the Facebook updates, if you're reading all the socials and stuff, you know, you start realizing that all that stuff was like so long ago when it was it was fresh.
Gospel at the time.
Yeah, when it was all fresh.
Like at the time, everyone hated each other. You know,
right?
That's people change. You know. But you have to also realize, too, at the time they were making that DVD, Jesse in particular was out of the band, like maybe 2-3 years at that point?
Yeah, and he was understandably a little salty, you know, about it and all that. But like, yeah, that's one of those things that, like, I feel like, you know, because there was and I'm going to take shots at it because I'm a douche, but like, there was an episode, so like there's this other podcast called Labeled, which is about Tooth and Nail and the history of that band. Matt Carr runs it, and for the most part he does a great job, you know. But I remember in their first season they had done they had just released like a 2-part episode about Zayo, and I remember listening to it. It was weird. My kids were doing some kind of like gym thing at the local YMCA, and I didn't want to do it, so I sat in the car and listened to that podcast. But they did some interviews with like Scott and Dan. I don't remember if you were on it or not, but it was I remember hearing Scott and Dan and maybe Russ, and they had interviewed Brett a little bit and all of that. And it was funny because it was like a week before we had Scott on discography discussion talking about Carcass. And I remember mentioning it to him as well. And I was like, why did they use so much interview footage from the DVD? Like that thing's like 10 years old, you know, and it created this, like, and like Matt asked them all these questions, like, you know, was it beneficial for you guys to be a Christian band at the time, and yada, 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 yada. And it took me wrong. Like the guy, like everybody answered honestly, you know, there wasn't anything like weird about it, but like, I remember thinking like they're trying to like they're painting the band in a way that I don't feel like really represents the band now. You know, like the current and I say the current incarnation of Zayo, but like what I'm really talking about is like the Zayo that's been around since 2006. Like it's 14 years.
I mean, to a certain extent, the Zayo that's been in existence since 1999.
Right. Like since Liberate came out. Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing, that there's a lot of, and they get into that on the DVD, on our DVD. There's a lot of, it's not as cut and dry as that, and it's not as black and white as are you or aren't you. You know, if you really listen to what everybody said, like especially Dan, and it was never that like black and white. And like basically Liberate on, there's no difference from Zayo in 2006, Zayo now, and Zayo then.
Zero, yeah. Like it's always been the same band, and that was the band that I was introduced to. You know, I can't say that like, oh, I bought Blood and Fire back in '98, and you know, Splinter Shards. Like I did, like I found out about all that stuff after. Like when I first got into Zayo, it was like the self-titled Prey to Chaos era, you know, right. And so like it had already been.
Open up those lyric booklets and look at those lyrics.
Right.
There's what on those records tells you that this is a Christian band.
Right. But also at the same time, it's not like anti, you know, it's not like,
and it's not now. Yeah.
No, not at all. Like literally,
that's what I mean. It's like
well-intentioned. The last song, I Leave You in Peace. Like, that's pretty, I mean, it is what it is. Like, you know, that's not up for interpretation or like, you know, any weird dissection. And I always thought that was really odd. And like, I remember the first time I saw Zayo was in 2003, I think. And it was like right off of Funeral. Maybe, well, no, okay. So I saw them before the Funeral of God era. So it was like, it was Jesse, Scott, Russ, and Josh Ashworth from Society's Finest. And I definitely remember being like, well, it's not the Zayo I wanted to see, but I guess it's fine, and
Right.
but then Funeral came out, and I saw them a year later. It was like with Remembering Never and 12 Tribes and all that, but
Okay.
like they were, and I remember like talking to Scott after the show, and him just being like, well, we haven't been like a Christian band for. He's like, since I've been in the band, like not really,
Right.
but like, he's like, we also like don't have a problem. Like people that grew up listening to that kind of music, like, I don't think that they would have a problem with like, like with what we're doing. It's been a dichotomy for them, and you especially, coming into the band amidst all that. And that's why I think that your perspective is kind of unique in that you kind of came into this. Was it difficult for you at first? Like, I mean, I'm not talking about
not at all.
I'm not talking about the band members themselves, but just like the perception.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I don't know. It's weird. Like, I never hesitated when they asked me for that reason, because I had been following the band. And even if I was uncomfortable, if I was going to be uncomfortable with anything lyrically that was happening, I would have said no.
Sure.
Or if I thought that there was something going on, I would have said no. But I knew, I'm like, there's nothing happening here that's like weird or it should even be controversial for anybody.
Right.
But it's one of those things. It's like when I joined, I mean, you have to remember when I joined, like YouTube didn't exist at that point.
Right. Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of footage flying around of bands. So everything that people were hearing about bands, it was all like word of mouth. And like, you'd hear these stories of like, oh, well, I saw this band Zayo, and the singer was like, they were throwing Bibles out into the crowd. And the singer was like, had like this like 10-minute prayer session in the middle of the set. Like that's what you'd hear. Now, here's the thing. I knew all those guys. I knew Dan and Scott and Rut, and I'm just like, I don't remember them ever doing that kind of stuff. Like back when I knew them.
They don't strike me as those kind of guys. Yeah.
Because they're not. Everything that people were saying was like, yeah, when like Sean was the singer, Sean didn't have any qualms about telling everyone at the show what he thought and like what their mission was. That was their thing. Dan never did that. So like what a lot of what was happening was, it was like, it was like the telephone game and like word of mouth. It's like, oh, you been to Zayo? Oh yeah, I saw Zayo at a show back at blah, 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 at some church and blah, blah, blah. And the singer did this. They're probably talking about the Sean era.
If they're not just making it up.
Or like they just saw the band one time and they didn't realize which singer was which. Dan never did that stuff. Like it just wasn't part of like that. The band changed when Dan and Brett and Russ joined. And I'm not saying that like what Sean and those guys did, like I totally back that. Like that took a lot of guts at that time for what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because they were going into hostile territory and do that. And it's like, hey man, you guys had your convictions, you had what you were, what you believed in. That's what hardcore is. You do that. Like that's what you do.
It's no different than Earth Crisis getting up and preaching about veganism, or all the straight edge bands and all that. Yeah,
it's like it's like I can listen to Earth Crisis. It doesn't mean I don't like to go home and eat steak. Like it doesn't affect me. You know what I mean? It's like I can listen to that even if I don't necessarily believe in what there's. It's.
Yeah, and even if there's a grain of truth in what they're saying, like, you can take that and apply it to your own life in whatever way you want to.
Yeah, it's whatever. It's like I don't get offended just because, necessarily because somebody's saying something I don't believe in. When they're like, people get so mad about that. It's like I can't listen to that band because they said this thing that I don't agree with. It's just like, you know what? A lot of bands say things I don't agree with. Like it's fine, whatever.
I mean, I grew up as a youth group kid. And I listened to Morbid Angel. Do you think I agreed with everything Morbid Angel had to say? It's one of those like.
Here's the thing. I love Morbid Angel.
Oh, we all do.
But here's the thing. If somebody said like, I absolutely agree with everything Morbid Angel says. Like, I'd kind of be worried about that person.
Right, because I don't even think like David Vincent agrees with everything Morbid Angel says. You know, like
it's like if you listen to Guar, you have to agree with everything they say. It's
right, right, yeah.
You probably have some problems if you do.
Or Carcass, or any band like that. Yeah,
there's some issues there. You know.
Well, and what really drew me to Zao originally was that they were a story band, because like it's not like Dan was totally silent between songs. He'd sit down and be like, "Hey, this song is about whatever," you know what I mean? Like this song is about, you know, a period of life, or a period of time in my life where I, you know, experienced this and yada, 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 yada. And I always found that to be like, I found it really incredible. Like whenever I saw you guys in Nashville, most recently, or not most recently, but, when I saw you guys in Nashville, like Dan even did that. You know, he's like, you know, this song is what, you know, kept me from putting a gun to my head, you know, like, and all that stuff. And like that.
Well, and that's the thing. You say that he said that. And I don't disagree that he said that.
Yeah. No,
but here's the thing. I don't remember him saying that. And the reason I don't remember him saying that is because it's not something he says every night.
Right. It's unique to that.
Like
show.
If he said that in Nashville, for that particular reason, at that moment in Nashville, he's like, I'm going to say something, and that's the thing. Nothing's scripted. Like, it's not like, okay, so we're going to play this song. And right before we play this song, Dan says this thing about this, or in those moments when those things happen, that's Dan being honest in that moment. And he probably didn't say that at any of those other shows on that tour.
Or he said something else about a different song. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, or maybe not. Like that's it. Like we don't have a script. There's not an agenda. There's not a, you know. And if Dan came to me tomorrow, if he was working on lyrics and he's like, you know what, this next record is all about, you know, my love for Jesus, I wouldn't blink an eye. I'd be like, okay, that's what, you know. There's no whatever, as long as it works for him. That's the thing. Like Zao works when Dan's doing what he's comfortable with. I don't think he's going to say that right now. I'm just saying that if he did, like it's not a mission. Like the band doesn't have a mission right now, but at the same time, we don't have a mission to not be something either.
Right.
It's just, it has to be honest, and it has to be.
Yeah. No, you're definitely like I get that, because it's one of those. And I don't know if it was Dan or Scott or somebody said. It may have been on the DVD. It may not have been. My memory is getting so bad over time. But I remember something along the lines of like, it's like, if you want us to be that Christian band that you like, we are that. If you're not looking for that, we are that too. You know, if we are a band that you are listening to just to say like, oh, I relate to that, or I've experienced something like this, we're that to you also. You know, like it's been such a career where, you know, it's really just, I mean, at this point, it's guys just writing music that they, number one, think that people are going to like. And number two, like, just be like, this is where I'm at right now. This is what I'm doing. And that's been the thing that I've appreciated the most about the lyrical output, the musical output, and all of that has been just that, like, as I've gotten older, yeah, I started off listening to Zao when they were, you know, considered, you know, to be like this Christian band or whatever. And that's what I was all about, you know. And as I'm older now, I think I still like align with that, like with Christianity and teachings of Jesus and stuff like that. But like, it's been so skewed over the years, you know, like that whole idea of like, you can't really take what people are saying in a religious sense at face value and things like that. And Zao was the only band that was ever there for me in that respect. It's like, dude, I get that. Like, you can't like trust that somebody doesn't have like an ulterior motive. Or, you know, like, yeah.
Well, which is what blows my mind is when people are like, oh, I miss like the Christian days of like Blood and Fire. And I'm like, if you look at the lyrics of like the song I Leave You in Peace that you brought up, or like It's Hard Not to Shake on The Fear, or What Will You Find on Awake. If you look at those lyrics and what he's talking about, it is literally Lies of Serpents and Ravaged Ritual.
Over and over and over again. Yeah.
The theme has not changed.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
It's just that there's not a label. It's not under the umbrella of a label that like, oh, well, they're putting up Christian stuff. And that like.
Because they're trying to sell records in Christian bookstores and stuff. Yeah.
Well, yeah. That was our big thing with The Fear. They wanted us to say that they're like, well, the Christian bookstores won't sell the record if you're not a Christian band. Or like, and like everyone, Scott and Dan and those guys were like, well, wait, they sold Funeral of God. And technically we were saying we weren't a Christian band. They're like, yeah, but they just need to hear you say you are. Even if you're not, go ahead and just say you are, and they'll put it in the stores.
And they're like, well, that's not really like cool either.
Yeah, and that's what we said. And we're like, no, we're not doing that. And we actually gave we played the Cornerstone Festival that year. And we had like they do these big press conferences with the bands. And we said that.
I remember that. Yeah.
Oh my God. It was the most uncomfortable thing. And I remember talking to Dan, and I'm like, Dan, how was that compared? He said, because Dan and Scott were telling me that they had such an awkward press conference at Cornerstone when the Funeral of God record came out, because everybody was just like, explain this album title. And he said, as awkward as that was, it wasn't as awkward as the moment where we exposed what the Christian bookstore distributors were saying to us.
Right.
They're like, no, just say you're a Christian band and we'll stock it.
Right.
Just like,
like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah, I remember that.
And when we said that at Cornerstone, and I remember they were posting all of the press conferences on the website of the place that was doing it, and they would not post ours. We were the only press conference that wasn't posted.
Yeah, I saw that. I had a really flimsy press pass that year.
Yeah.
And that was before I was doing anything, like what I'm doing now. But I remember watching that, and I remember looking over my buddy and being like, is this a trial? Because it seemed like a trial. Like, it was like, well, if you guys aren't ashamed, because it was literally one of those like, are you guys ashamed? And it's like, we're not. It's like, we're not ashamed of anything. We're just trying to be upfront with you guys, and like nobody's getting that, and that always just blew my mind. And like, I
know there were people that worked at the label at the time at Fair that were upset because they're just like, well, if you would have said you were a Christian, we would have sold more records. And it's just like, but you're that's exactly what we're trying to get away from. It's like just saying it to sell records.
Even if you guys were hardcore Bible thumpers at that time, a hardcore Bible thumper that like really pays attention would not be okay with selling the name of God like that. You know what I mean? Like,
right. That's what we never understood. Like,
yeah. It's funny. I'll get off that. I could go off. Yeah, you guys are.
We're
evil.
The bad guys.
You guys are evil. I don't even know why I listen to your guys' band, but yeah, especially after you put out that DVD that came with the Fear, and you guys were upset over a football game. I mean, oh my God. But yeah. I bet you guys got some interesting emails after that, but
no, not as many as you'd think.
Really?
Not as many as yeah.
That's surprising.
Nowhere near as many as you would think. I mean, we got more emails of people yelling at us about how the record sounded than we did about anything that was said on the DVD.
Right, yeah, because it sounds like you guys just like plugged into an amp and then recorded the amp, and you're like, yeah, we did do that.
People got so mad. Oh, then again, people got really mad at us for the Awake record because of how that was recorded. This is like you can't win. It's just like whatever. That's why we just don't care anymore.
I guess
we don't listen to that stuff.
I guess you didn't hear my half-hour bitch session about Awake and how the cymbals on that record are so loud that like my ears are getting stabbed when I'm listening to it. I took the MP3 version and I burned that to a CD and listened to that. Dude, but take that with a grain of salt, because like as far as audio production goes, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
The funny thing is, and I'll see if I can find it, and I'll send this to you just as a personal gift to you.
Okay.
I think there's an email where I am arguing with our manager and Carl that ran Ferret.
Yeah.
About the volume of the cymbals on the Awake record.
Okay.
Because they wanted them turned down.
Okay.
And I said, no, absolutely not. Leave them where they are.
I mean, it doesn't kill.
I feel so bad. I had the opportunity that I could have fixed this for you.
It's okay.
And I fought it.
It's okay, man. I'm not a big enough name in this like podcasting world to where people are making records being like, well, I wonder what Dan thinks about that. Nobody's saying that. Maybe one day I'll get to a point where they are, but we are not there yet. We were definitely not there when you were recording that record.
Basically, me keeping the cymbals up because I knew it was upsetting a couple people involved in making the record was my form of protest, because I was against how that record was recorded from the start.
Okay.
100%. So I was just being a dick.
Well,
so.
I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this with like the utmost, please don't anybody pick this up and run it as a news story. But like, so that record was produced by Tim Lambesis, but like, was it really?
No.
Okay.
No. He did, his name's on there in name only. Basically, everything, most of what's on you hear in that record was Daniel Castleman.
Okay.
Basically the engineer.
Just engineered it. You guys just came in and knew what you wanted to do. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I mean, the way we work is that when we walk into the studio, when it's like, okay, we're going to record, we know exactly what's happening. Like we don't use a producer in the traditional sense of like, okay, guys, I think you need to add a chorus here. And I think that's what Tim wanted to do. And I think he was kind of shocked when I showed up, because I flew out to California to his studio to record the drums. All of the guitars and stuff were done back in PA. Right. Everything was sent over to Daniel and Tim for them to put together as the record. But I think when I showed up there, Tim was ready to like, oh, let's break these songs apart and restructure stuff. And we're just like, no, I'm just laying down the drums. Like we already know what's going on. And he pretty much wasn't in the studio the whole time I was there. I mean, like once we got going, he's like, there's no reason for me to be here. And he like left, and me and Daniel just like laid down all the drums to the point where we had like an extra 3 days of studio time booked. And that was when, Tim and I forget why. And he was talking about doing a bunch of cover songs for the Austrian Death Machine thing. And me and Tim and Daniel like literally sat there trying to think of thrash metal and speed metal songs and stuff that would tie into the Arnold Schwarzenegger theme. Yeah. And like he would give me like a list of songs and I'd be like, okay, Megadeth, Killing Is My Business, Iron Fist by Motorhead. And I'd go back to, the house that I was staying at that was connected to his studio. And I would like download these songs if I didn't already have them with me and like transcribe out the drum parts. And I would come in the next day and I just recorded a bunch of cover songs for the Austrian Death Machine stuff.
Okay.
Because there was nothing for him to do. We had all this studio time booked for the drums, and I finished everything in like 2 days. And he's like, well, we're here. Let's lay down some drums for my stuff.
So that's why you're listed on Wikipedia as a session musician for Austrian Death Machine.
Yeah. There was the one of the Austrian Death Machine records that he put out. Like there was like a second disc that was all covers.
Right.
And I played on all that stuff. There's basically the same drums, the same session that we did the Awake stuff at.
Okay. All right.
But like with Awake, like I know Tim wanted to sound replace all the drums with like samples.
You guys did that already.
We're just like, no, we don't want to do that.
You did that already.
Yeah. So, I mean, they toned down a lot of the natural sound of the drums, which was stupid because the place we recorded the drums at out in California had an amazing drum room. Like it sounded so good in there that I'm just like, why did we wait? Why did you waste this? Like, but I mean, he wanted to like quantize stuff, and we were just like, no. Like there was like little things that there's things that Zayo uses Pro Tools like a tape machine. We don't do a lot of like microscopic editing. There's a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of things that aren't quite lined up. To us, that's what keeps it natural sounding.
That's the like, even if there's a mistake on it, but you listen to it and you're like, yeah, but that sounds good. You just kind of move on with it. Yeah.
A lot of the drum fills and weird transitions that are in some of those old Zayo songs are because of that. They're like mistakes. There's somebody would play something messed up and then that became the song. Like that became part of the song. Like there's still a couple Zayo songs where we play the mistakes live.
Right.
Like they weren't written that way. That's just how people know it. So we just roll with it. But yeah, so I don't really know what Tim did other than like we used his studio and his engineer guy.
Well, it's just so weird because like as a music fan, like I bought the first As I Lay Dying record when it came out on Pluto Records, and shout out to Eric Shirley if he's listening to this. But like, it's definitely like when I heard that first As I Lay Dying record, I remember being like, who's this band? Like this just sounds like a cheap knockoff of like some Zayo songs, and like, I mean, and I don't mean that like like obviously they changed their sound from that early on, but like, I remember like whenever I saw it's like, oh yeah, the new record, cause there was like a press release or whatever, like for Awake. And it was like, going to be produced by Tim Lambesis of As I Lay Dying. And I was all like, how can a guy that started his career ripping off Zayo songs, like go in there and coach those guys like on what to do. And that's harsh. I mean, like from a fan perspective, it's always harsh, but like that's but what it was harsh feeling.
From my end too, because like I was again, here's the thing, leading into it, I didn't really know Tim. I didn't know any of those guys from that band. I knew what Tim did. Like I knew his production style and I was against it. I was just like, this is not what we need to do right now.
It's
my
clean.
first choice, which got like, again, like at the time, like the tensions in the band. I mean, you have to realize this was after we broke up,
right?
Not really break up, but took the break after the Fear. And then I was out doing the From Autumn to Ashes stuff. When the Awake thing came up, when it was initially pitched to me, I found out about it through our manager because Scott was afraid. I don't know if Scott was afraid to ask me. Like my manager, our manager at the time, Ryan, called us and said, called me and was like, would you want to play on a Zayo record again? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I didn't hear it from Scott, because like this thing, like when you get in that realm of like managers and labels and all this stuff, sometimes the internal communication can get weird.
And maybe you're afraid that too much time has passed and that like you might have to if you reach out, you might have to explain yourself or like whatever. Yeah. I get that.
But yeah, initially when we were doing it, like at the time I was like, I wanted my first choice to handle Awake was Brian McTurnan. I don't know if you know Brian. He did Brian McTurnan. I think he's done some of the Darkest Hour stuff.
Okay, yeah.
But what he's most known for is a lot of the Cave-In stuff. Like he's got recorded like Jupiter. And
really?
Like,
okay, I did not know that. Okay.
And he did the last From Autumn to Ashes record, the Holding a Wolf by the Ears record.
Yeah.
And I really liked his stuff because it was like it had just the amount of like edge and rawness to it, but it wasn't like completely like abrasive. Like it would have pulled us out of the Albini world a little bit, but given it a little bit more polish. And I like the way he records drums. And at the time, I was just like, because of my connections with From Autumn to Ashes, like I had met him and like, he'd mixed a live record we did. Just like, I'd love to do something with Brian, or at least have him do the drums and like maybe have him mix it. And through the course of the whole thing, everything was just like, oh, well, Tim really wants to do it, and the price is right, and it'll be a big selling point to the the metalcore fans. But I was against it. But you're dealing with a label, you're dealing with other people, and other people that have vested interests. And I ended up like, I'm just like, I'm not gonna fight. I don't want to fight with people. I didn't think we were gonna make another record again. I'll just roll with what everyone wants to do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I get that. Like, because from a label perspective, Tim Lambesis' name is a marquee name that year.
Right.
And so, yeah, like it makes total sense from a financial.
But at the same time, I knew it was a pointless endeavor because I walked in there, and when I'm sitting there and I'm talking to Tim and I'm talking with Daniel, who, was his, engineer at the time. I don't know maybe he still is. I don't know. But I'm sitting there talking to them, and I'm like, Daniel, I don't want it to be, we don't want sound replacing. We don't want everything quantized. We don't want it to be perfect. We don't want it to be, all these various things. And I gave him some reference things of records we like. And he like came back and he's like, I can do some of this, but it's kind of not what we do. He's like, why, and I questioned, why are you guys here? And I said, I don't know. Just
They told me to show up here and record some drums. Yeah.
So, and I think that was part of why that record came out the way it did, because it was us, it was both parties, us as Zayo and, Tim and Daniel basically like trying to find a middle ground and compromise to make the other person happy. And it just, here's the thing. I like that record. I'm proud of that record.
Oh, I do too. I mean, for the longest time for me, it was like the only new Zayo record. And so, yeah, I dug into it. I dug into the lyrics and the songs. And that was something Dan said, probably at the St. Louis show. He was like, I like that record. He's like, there's a lot of material I feel like people just smooth over. He's like, but if you really look at that record, he's like, a lot of the lyrics that I put down on that were like really like some of my favorites, you know.
That's some of my favorite too. And the thing is, those songs were written before Tim ever came into the picture or whoever came into the picture. Those songs, like the performances in the songs would have been the same no matter who we recorded it with. Like the songs were what the songs were. That was nothing about those songs was influenced by anything. That was going to be the record that came out after The Fear, regardless of when we stopped or what happened. It might have been recorded just slightly more raw if we had full control over it, or if, I had more say in it. And I think at the time, I mean, our intention, even when we made The Fear, we said, oh, the next record isn't going to be this raw. Like we can make a record like this, but we have to follow it up with something that's a little bit more, traditional in a sense. Like you basically can only make a record like The Fear maybe one time in your career.
Yeah.
You can only get away with that once. So we knew we were going to make something a lot more polished after the fact.
Well, and I think it kind of appealed to fans of Funeral maybe a little bit more, You
would think. But again, it's one of those weird things that we waited too long. If Awake would have, Fear came out in 2006, if Awake would have come out in 2007, and then technically speaking, if we would have put out a record right after that, all the songs on Pyrrhic Victory and half of the songs on Well-Intentioned Virus were actually written at the time we were doing Awake. So had we kept going, the next record essentially would have been probably an amalgam of Pyrrhic Victory and Well-Intentioned Virus a year after that.
That's interesting to think about that stuff out of sequence.
Totally changes the context of what the band was doing. The same way that people look at the time, if Zayo would have put out Self-Titled and then broke up for 5 years and that was your final statement for several years,
right.
Self-Titled would have been looked at very different than it is looked at now.
I think it would have been considered like a magnum opus. Like everybody would have been like, this was what it was all leading up to, folks. I make the Refused comparison a little bit where, they put out Shape of Punk to Come and then they just kind of fizzled out after that. And then whenever they came back and their next record wasn't that, everybody got super upset. So I could definitely see a very similar scenario.
I don't know. I remember buying Self-Titled when it came out. I was so angry. I was just like, this is so horrible. And it didn't make sense to me until 2 records later. And then I was just like, oh, so this is just that weird record in the discography. And then it became one of my favorites.
It's definitely not my favorite Zayo record, but yeah.
Context is everything to me when I listen to a band. Sometimes people say, "Oh, that's their worst record," and I'm just like, "No, man, it's like the weird record that no other band could have made, other than a band making this complete fall on your face record." There's something very unique about that concept to me that makes me appreciate a record that much more.
Yeah, I mean, Self-Titled is one of those records that it's not my favorite Zayo record. I mean, and when I say it's not my favorite Zayo record, I'm a super fan, so pretty much I'm like, yeah, but it's still better than your favorite band's favorite record. But it's one of those, I remember, but at the same time, as much as I want to criticize it, there's still some bangers on that record. Oh, yeah. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting about when you joined the band specifically was we started hearing that stuff from the back catalog. Because there was a time where you'd go and see Zayo and for instance, Parade of Chaos had just come out.
Yeah.
And you go and see Zayo and they're playing, Liza Serpents and Autopsy and all of that, all those type of songs. Everything's off of Liberate, everything's off of Blood and Fire. They might play a Self-Titled song, but
right.
Probably not the one that you want to hear. And I remember when you joined the band, it was okay, we're going to start playing At Zero live.
Yeah.
And whenever I saw you guys in Indy, you guys played Parade of Chaos, which I was just like, I never thought I'd see that live. Well, I did see him play that once at Cornerstone on the funeral tour, but like for the most part, like those records were like just not talked about. Like they were just like thrown under the rug, and it was like,
I think we played Free the Three a while during the Fear era
when it was relevant.
And recently we started playing the Buzzing.
That's, you know what, you're right. It was the Buzzing that you played, not Parade of Chaos. Yeah.
And we did play Parade of Chaos relatively recently. That we may have played it at Indy. Like Parade of Chaos has been in rotation recently.
You may have played it in St. Louis. I'm getting the shows mixed up a little bit, but
no. I mean, like I said, Parade of Chaos, the Buzzing, Free the Three. I've played Angel Without Wings a couple times. That song gets left out for different reasons, though, and it comes up occasionally. Like people bring it up.
Well, and there was that weird time where Scott was playing it in his other band.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things though that like the main reason we don't play that song is it just we can't. Like what I said earlier about the set constructions, it's hard to slot that in. Like it just doesn't. You feel like no matter where you put it, it just like it kills the momentum in the wrong way. And every once in a while it comes up, and then it's always just everyone's just like, well, how do we make this work? Or it doesn't seem like just slot it in.
Right. You don't want to be like Nickelback and get up there and be like, we're going to slow it down for you guys now for a little while.
Yeah.
I know you guys are here to like kill each other, but you know.
We do slow it down. I mean, even like playing like the Liberate intro. I mean, that's our version of slowing it down.
But that's cool. Not that Angel Without Wings isn't cool. That's my wife's favorite Zayo song, but like it's.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of songs that come up that I mean, there's certain songs that we bring up. I mean, Dan has been pushing for the Buzzing since I joined the band.
Okay,
and it wasn't until recently and I've always backed that. And I forget who it was that we had to talk into. It might have been Scott. But yeah, Russ and I in particular, and I think we can both say this because we don't play on the record. I know Russ and I both say that Parade of Chaos is our favorite Zayo record.
My co-host Joe told Scott that to his face.
I tell Scott that. I tell Scott that to his face all the time, and he gets so mad.
He did. He got a little bit like, "Well, that's your opinion," you know. Like it got a little tense there for a minute, but like it was so funny because, but at the same time, like you know, it's an exciting record, and it's not that the other Zayo records aren't exciting. It's just that one is has its own identity in maybe what somebody that wrote it would feel like is a bad way. But for the rest of us, we're just like, dude, it was cool. It was different. It wasn't what we were expecting at all.
I mean, self-titled is weird in a very obvious way. Like it's weird and like, oh, you got these electronic drums. It's got this like weird like techno and weird ambient elements going on. It's a weird record in a very obvious way. Parade of Chaos is weird in a very abstract way. Like, and that's what I like about it. It's
absolutely. Yeah. Like it's a weird one. I remember my first memory of self-titled is I bought it and me and a buddy of mine we were skateboarding outside of this was before I was too fat to skateboard, but we were skateboarding outside of his house and we were blasting self-titled really loud, and this little kid came up to us and was like, "You need to turn that down. It's upsetting my parents," or something. And we're like, and then, so you know, the record became like really cool for like 2 weeks. We're like, this upset somebody's parents, but but yeah, like I mean, with all the stuff that I've absorbed and gotten through, you know, with the band over the years, one of the things that really blows my mind is, you know, whenever I'm telling people like, you should check out the new Zayo stuff, like there are people still to this day that are like, Zayo, aren't they that band from like Solid State or whatever? And I'm like, no, they haven't been on Solid State in like long time. You know, like it's totally different. Then I'll show them Well Intentioned, and like that's the record that they'll listen to and be like, oh, wow, I really like this band. I didn't like the stuff that they had before. What do you like? I guess like what do you think about Well Intentioned being kind of because I actually do view it in a lot of ways, despite what you just told me about like when those songs were written, as kind of a new beginning for the band. Like we're actually in a new era of Zayo, and I feel like it's the healthiest era.
Oh, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean that's that aspect, like the healthiest era, like from all like interpersonal, business related, just general having fun with things. Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think it was sort of a reset, like in a lot of ways. I mean, even musically, I mean, there were certain things that like, and to this day, Scott will tell you, he's like, because Scott is like the primary, songwriter or song starter, however you want to put it, up to a certain point. If you'd like go from like the Fear onwards, like almost everything started with Scott. Like,
right. Hey guys, I got this riff. Yeah.
Or even just the general mood of the song, sometimes completed songs. And he became very conscious around when, like, post Awake of like, I don't want to, he's not opposed to singing, and we like when he sings. I know there's people that hate when he sings.
Oh, I love it.
There's that whole contingent of people that like, singing on this stuff, like, fuck that shit.
I can listen to a whole record of him singing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would too. And I think he gets better every time he does it. It's like, and even then with the Fear, when we did the Fear, it wasn't a conscious decision to not really have him sing on stuff. It just, we never think about it that way. But I think after Awake, he did start consciously thinking about, I don't want to force it in.
Sure.
Like there was a lot of stuff on Awake where his vocal parts were already in the demos when we got them. So Dan would work around them. And like now, like there's a lot of stuff from Virus onwards where he sings on almost every song he sends us. But at the same time, he's like, Dan, if you come up with something better, we'll mute my singing.
Right.
Or I'll pull it out. Like everything's very open. I mean, it's like just a different way of approaching how we do stuff. I mean, he used to send songs with like general drum beats programmed, and then I would change stuff. And sometimes it'd be like, no, go back to what I programmed. And very rarely does that happen anymore. You know what I mean? Like everybody everything's more fluid now. We all trust each other for what we're doing. Yeah, it's a very different way of working. I mean, we had to. I mean, we don't get together in the room and write. Like everything happens remotely now. But like I said, everybody trusts each other, and we're all kind of like on the same path, and everybody has their own roles in the band. Like what they handle. Like I look to Scott, I'm like, hey, do you have some material for us to start with? And then he sends it to me, and then I explain to him how I think we should divide it out. I'm like, let's put these on a 7-inch. Let's make a record out of this. This is what we can handle on this. And they're like, okay. And then we send it off to Dan. He does his thing, and we all just end up passing things around. Very few creative arguments. Like I can't think of the last time we had ever argued about anything.
You're like at each other's throats. Like, no, we're not doing this. Yeah.
I mean, that whole remix record we did. I mean, I pretty much conceived everything we were doing. I sent everything over to them. I'm like, here's what I want to use for the cover art. Here's the formats. Like blah blah blah. These are the remixes. Everyone's like, awesome. Like no one argued about any, like everyone was like, cool. It's almost like if somebody comes up with a good idea, we roll with it, and we just recognize it's a good idea. And it's happened with all of us. Dan will be like, I have this idea for something. We're like, okay, let's do it. Like, because we put out so much stuff, we have nothing to lose. Who cares? Even if the idea we have falls on its face, it's like, oh, we'll get that other thing coming up in another 6 months. So that'll make people forget about the thing that we did that was a failure. Right. Like at this point, you can't have a stupid idea.
Yeah.
It's we're going to put out a record on a Nintendo cartridge. All right. It's like, what if everyone says that's dumb? It's like, all right, well, we'll move on. We'll have the record will be coming out, At the time, we were thinking like, oh, the record will come out 6 months after that. Everyone will have forgotten about it.
Dude, you trolled me so hard on Facebook because you were posting pictures of you making that, and like now I know, and I should have just asked Scott immediately whenever like the picture started posting, but I didn't. I was like, well, let's just see what I don't want to ask somebody and ruin the surprise. You know what I mean? Right. And I actually, okay, so like to my left, I have a old school computer, like old school. Like I've got a 3.5-inch floppy drive, a CD-ROM drive. It runs like Windows 95. I play Doom on it and stuff. But like I thought for sure that you were gonna like put out maybe a single or 2 songs or something on an actual 5.5-inch floppy drive. And so like I went on eBay and I bought a 5.5-inch floppy drive. Like, cause I was like ready for it, you know. And I was like, I'm not even going to hear the whole thing, like, because it's a 5.5 inch, it's a 5.25 inch floppy drive. So like, I'm going to have to take the files that are on there and like combine them together to get the record, you know, to get the music. And I and then it was like, oh, he's just cutting the insides of it out and putting the CD sleeves in there. And I was so like, I mean, I wasn't mad, like it was funny, but like
I still think that there's people that never connected those dots,
never got the reference. Yeah,
never figured out that it was actually a CD. It was just packaged in one of those. Like because we just did a like a standard run of a regular CD and digipacks.
Yeah,
and like there was a point where we had the CD-ROM packet, the CD, the what do you call it, the floppies. We had a bunch of the floppies. It like they stalled. There was like 10 of them left and they would not sell. I'm just like, my God, when have we ever made something in this limit of a quantity that we're still sitting on like this?
Yeah.
And then when the regular digipack version came, all of a sudden they're like flying off the shelf. And I'm just like, wait a minute. I think people didn't realize that was a CD.
They were waiting for the CD version. Yeah. That's crazy. It's funny too because and then I got bummed out because I missed the Nintendo cartridge because I remember like I'm living in a weird world now where like years ago I didn't have to like try that hard to get a Zayo release, and like now we're living in a world where I have to like stay up for like when it goes live.
That thing blew our mind. I mean, I thought we were going to have. I mean, we were already prepared. I was like, I had a list of like for press stuff that we were going to reach out to, like even going out of the music industry, going into the video game and like the retro gaming world, about like press release stuff about like, oh, this band did this thing. It sold out so fast we couldn't even do any PR for the fact that we did it.
Right.
Because like a couple of people that I reached out to, they're like, well, why are we going to do PR on this thing that no one can even get? And it's just like, we had it's like 30 seconds. They were gone.
That's insane.
And it wasn't flippers. Like it wasn't people ordering like 2 or 3 or 4. It was literally people just ordering 1.
Yeah, it's that weird scenario where you're like so in sync with the mindset of the fans where it like kind of lines up, you know, in a weird way where like, yeah, there's actually probably tons of old school Nintendo fans that also listen to Zayo, you know, like it's a weird thing.
I didn't think there was enough that would pay, you know, what was it, like $65 for that?
It was quite a bit. I missed it.
I really thought we were gonna be sitting on some of those for a while.
I went to bed.
I really did.
I went to bed and I was like, I'll just pick one up in the morning, and then they were gone, and I was like, oh man. But like full transparency, I don't have a Nintendo that will play it. I've got I don't have the original Nintendo. I have the top loading Nintendo that they released a few years later.
Yeah, it won't work on those.
Yeah, it's the actual. It's the official Nintendo product, but it will not play that. Which I mean, don't get me wrong. Like my life goal isn't to listen to a Zayo record on my TV speakers.
I mean, it's the same record. You would hear otherwise. It's just that we just found an interesting delivery system for it.
Right.
But you're not missing anything.
No,
like,
it was
if
cool.
If we only released it on that, then that would be different. Which there was at one point, because we've known about this for a while, that we could do this. Like even back, like there was talk about doing the well-intentioned virus on the Nintendo cartridge.
Oh, that's good.
But I was like, let's just hold it. Like I have an idea. Like, well, maybe we'll do something later. So we kept that in our back pocket. But no, I mean and there's been a couple times like we joke around about this stuff, and now to the point where we can kind of get away with some of the stuff. It may happen. There's been talk sometimes about like, what if we only release something on a particular format?
Right.
Like not digitally, not on Spotify, not on YouTube. You can not on vinyl. You can only get it on the Nintendo.
That's
like, what
scary.
does that do? How nuts does that make people?
That's scary though, you know, because at that point you've got people on your socials like crying foul, like like why couldn't I get my vinyl
tempting.
Version? Or
it's tempting sometimes. It's like, well, like we're not even going to put this online. Like you can't even hear it. You can only hear it if you have this. Like, what does that? How insane does that make? and it's not like we're trying to take advantage of anybody. It's just like, let's have fun with it.
Right.
But we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, no, that would be cool. I mean,
we probably won't. I mean, we might. There's been a couple talks of things happening in the future that logistically it might make more sense, and not to that limited, but like maybe a 7-inch comes out and there's no digital companion to it. It's only on that 7-inch.
Well, I think Mobius strip wasn't available right away. I don't think on digital, unless I'm remembering that wrong. Because I remember having that, and I don't remember being able to stream that. I think
the digital release was a little bit later, but it was always intended to be out digitally. It was just a little bit delayed. Yeah, I mean, there was talk of doing some cover songs. So, and we were talking about maybe releasing a series of 7-inches that were stylistically connected, of like, 2 or 3 different cover songs on each thing. And that would be a situation where, because cover songs are weird when you like get into like properly licensing them and stuff. Digital licensing gets really tricky. If you're just doing the licensing for the vinyl, it's a little bit more straightforward and keep everything above the board and legal. So then about like, maybe we do some limited 7-inches of like Zayo doing these covers, but you can only get them on the vinyl.
Weren't you guys going to do a Yes cover?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's in the talks. Yeah, that's still up.
We were harassing Scott about that a while back, and it was like, yeah, like I remember at some point we sent to like a list of Yes songs that we wanted to hear Zayo cover.
Yeah, there's a couple Yes songs in the rotation to consideration. There's a Depeche Mode song being talked about. We all have our little wish lists. I actually came up with a couple interesting ones recently. I haven't pitched them to the band. I've talked about, there's a Carp song I want to cover. I don't know if you're from the band Carp.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I really think a version of Bacon Industry would be great.
That would be interesting. I can't even imagine what that would sound like, but yeah. It was completely out of left field. There's actually a Mr. Bungle song that I think would work. I don't know if that will. I don't know if it's out of left field. It's a lot out of left field as you think. Joe and I were talking about that the other day, where it's like, you think the guys in Zayo would ever do a Mr. Bungle song? Like, we have weird conversations, but yeah, like, definitely.
That was my last. I can honestly say that was my last pre-coronavirus show.
Yeah, Mr. Bungle.
The Mr. Bungle reunion.
That's
with
awesome.
Lombardo and Scuddy, and
that's incredible.
It's great.
I haven't
thrash metal madness.
I haven't been to a show in forever. I've got 4 kids, so like my like the fact that I even get to do this, like what we're doing right now, is like incredible. But like,
hey, I got 2 here, man. It's I get it. I mean, it's when you push the timeline back of this, you just like can't get the kids down. It's like I was doing the same thing here.
My oldest is 6 years old, and like, it started off like reading bedtime books was like seemed like a good idea. Like you'd sit down with like a book, or I let him pick whatever bedtime book they want to read, and like she'll pick a book that's like a chapter book, and it's like it went from like, Sally Toadstool went to the store and bought a thing that she liked. The end. And now it's like Sally Toadstool's outside and the weather is nice and she feels the pressure on her ears and the wind blows through her hair, and it's like 82 pages long. And like, I used to read like really hardcore books, but for some reason as an adult, I'm like, oh my God, couldn't you have picked something like easier?
No, that's what they. Yeah, I mean, like I said, my 6-year-old. His big thing is the scary stories to tell in the dark book.
Oh wow! Do you have the original versions of those?
Yeah,
with that artwork.
Yeah,
that like basically, if you read those books as a kid, you would grow up to be a metal fan because pretty much. Yeah. He's like really into that. Like, oh it's kind of amazing, but also kind of concerning, but whatever. There's a terrifying one I remember where they like found a toe, and it wasn't that they found a toe and that the ghost of the person that had the toe like came to like kill them or whatever. It was the fact that they gave the toe to like their dad, and their dad's like, "This is what we're having for supper." Like that was like so bizarre to me. And they like cut it into 4 pieces and cooked it. And it was very strange. But
I remember Dan told me that like that was a big thing of Dan. He said that like he would like literally just keep going to the library back in the day and like renewing that.
Oh,
like
yeah.
he would like he literally always had that book checked out from the library. And he would just like go back and just like keep renewing it like as a kid.
It's such a weird mix of terrifying and stupid.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which, that's metal music too, but like,
but yeah, I mean, like I said, like to back up a minute, like that's just kind of what we're, we might put out like some like weird cover songs and like maybe they're only on the vinyl.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I'm sure they'll end up on YouTube, somebody will put them up on YouTube or whatever.
Sure.
But, it'll always be available. The music will always be there. The physical versions might be more limited, might be more, but you're always going to be able to hear the stuff. And we always, and if we put out a bunch of cover 7 inches or 10 inches over the course of a year or two, I'm sure at the end of everything, we'll batch everything together and put out a CD version and maybe then put like the digital version up on Spotify of everything at one time.
Right.
We can run all the licenses at the same time and make sure everything's, kosher, on that. And yeah, sky's the limit.